Welcome to Birds in the Sky, the podcast where we explore how making art and music can be powerful tools for boosting mental health and well-being. Whether you're an artist, a musician, or simply someone looking for new ways to nurture your mind, we'll dive into creative practices, share inspiring stories, and uncover how the act of creating can lead to healing, self-discovery, and growth. Tune in and let your creativity carry you forward. I'm your host, Matthew Crane. Let's fly. Welcome to another episode of the Birds in the Sky podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Crane. Today, we have Aleks Malejs in studio. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Aleks is an actor and a mental health advocate and a substance abuse counselor, right?
A lot of things, yeah.
A lot of things? Well, let's talk about, we'll get to all that, but let's talk about your passion for the arts. So when did you find yourself kind of knowing that you're going to go down that road and that you're not going to look back?
Okay, interesting story. Excuse me. So I feel like I was always involved in performance since I was a young girl. I have a very talented family on my father's side, and we would be doing backyard plays and school plays and community plays. And I was just always kind of like organically involved in those things. But when I was growing up, I thought I was going to be a politician. I thought I was going to be an astronaut. So really weird choices now looking back. But I think I've always been a seeker. And there was a time in my late teens, my mom lived in Montana for many years. She was a nurse for Indian Health Services and lived in Browning, just outside of Browning, Montana, on the Blackfeet Reservation. And I got hooked up with a group of people in my late teens. I think I was 17. I was there for the summer, and they introduced me to the mountains. And I started climbing mountains with these people. And little did I know that it would have like a really profound impact on the rest of my life. So it was actually climbing a mountain where I had to utilize every part of my being. So my physical self, my mental self, my emotional self, in order to achieve this goal. And we're not talking like hills in Allegheny. I'm talking, close to 10,000 foot peaks in Montana, just bouldering up to the summit. And it was on my way up to a summit where I realized, like, if you can do this, you can do anything. And whatever, right? I don't even know if I could label it. Like now I would say would be my higher power, the universe. Something spoke to me and told me that I needed to go down a theatrical path. I had a teacher in a junior college that told me that I reminded him of Lindsay Wagner and that I should do this for a while, do acting for a while. And that always stuck with me. And that comment and this mountain kind of created the next trajectory of my life. And so since I was in Montana and I loved Montana, I explored the University of Montana in Missoula, and they had a great theater program. And they had a touring company, the Montana Repertory Theater, that toured out of that facility. They weren't together, like it was the school and the theater company shared space, but they were separate. And so I applied for the University of Montana, and I started an education in theater in my early 20s. I didn't go to college right away. So that was the beginning.
That's awesome. So I love that while you're climbing and bouldering, because it's so difficult, you're focused so that you don't fall, but somewhere in the back of your mind, you're thinking to yourself, hey, I can do this. I can really make this happen and live a life in the creative arts and theater. And that's super amazing. And I've had a lot of experiences like that too, where I try to stay out in the world and do difficult things, because the more difficult things I do, it really just tells me that I can do anything. Like the whole reason I was able to start this podcast is because I've done difficult stuff like that. So it's important to get out and do difficult
things. And I think that I am 3 weeks away from turning 50. And I kind of love growing older for the wisdom that it brings you, right? So I don't know that I was capable of understanding that pivotal moment, right? Now looking back, I understand it a lot better. But in that moment, the pivotal moment was, this is a really hard thing that you're doing that many people will never ever do in their life. And this is setting you up for success and successfully getting through difficult things for the rest of your life. I had no idea. And so now to this day, 30 years later, I still find solace outside, in the mountains, in the woods, by a river. Like, that is my, I didn't know it was, I was having a spiritual experience, right? I didn't know. But it was just like, I think I want to do this. And little did I know, 30 years later, I'd still be doing it and be successful at it,
Spending time in nature can definitely have that effect on people.
Who knew?
Let's talk about theater, because there's something really powerful about theater. The Saturday Night Live's 50th anniversary has just come out, and I was watching it. I was speaking to my wife about it, about how there's two different experiences happening. As the audience, we're getting one kind of joy, one level, one layer of this joy, and it's coming at us. But on the stage, those actors and performers have a completely different experience to what they're putting out.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They mean it, and they know what the story and their lines are, and they're acting, and they're professionals, but they are having way more fun than I think that we are as an audience member. So I guess I have a question, that is, what has theater kind of revealed to you or done for you in the way of regulating your own mental health? And like, does it keep you grounded?
Yes. So let's rewind and we can circle back to this.
Let's do it.
But we'll put a pin in this. But I'm a person in recovery. I got sober in May of 2012. So 12 years, coming up on 13 years this year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And so I understand theater differently now in these 12 years than I did in the previous 12 years.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. So like I said, I had this teacher that supported kind of me taking this to a professional level, and I listened. I was very intoxicated for those first 15 years that I was practicing theater. And it's only been in the latter 13 years that I really understood it to be essential to me and how I get through life. I'm not entirely sure when that pivoted, but I do recall having a teacher in grad school. I went to the New School for Drama in New York City, and I had a teacher that taught me while I was in grad school, and she also taught me at HB Studios after I got sober. And she noticed a difference. And she said, "You're just much more present than I've ever seen you before." And I whispered in her ear, because I was very new to recovery and I was kind of in that pink cloud. And I was like, "I've not been drinking, And she's like, "I can tell, there's a presence about you that you've never displayed before." And so, over the past, I'm going to just call it like a decade, right? I moved away from New York City. I lived in New York City for 10 years, pursuing my education, pursuing the craft, pursuing the career. And I got sober in New York City. And when I got sober, the walls of New York kind of caved in a little bit. Sure. And I felt very trapped. And in New York, the cost of living is so high, and I couldn't really survive. I was just bartending to make ends meet, and I wasn't doing anything theatrical or creative. And so I really reached out to all of my family. I have family all over the United States. And I was like, "I'm dying here. I need out." And everybody was like, come here, come here, come here. And I have a brother that lives in Orchard Park, and he was like, come to Buffalo. And I was like, that feels safer. It feels safer because New York's just a stone's throw away. So if I change my mind, I could just run right back because I had a network of people there. I was there for a decade. And I came here for the summer to like hang out in his pool in Orchard Park and be around my nieces and nephews. And I got an audition, and the rest is history. So over the past decade, in tandem with me working a program of recovery, I'm a member of a 12-step program. I have learned so much about life, about recovery, about theater, all at the same time. And so I think, we talked a little bit before we started that like I never realized, and I continue to realize, like how the skills that you need to utilize on stage are the skills that like get you through life, right? So
Yeah, let's explore that.
yeah, okay,
Like
yeah.
what are some of these skills?
So for me, it is being present, a number one. There was a version of me as an actor and as a person that was very superficial, right? Really about like how I was coming off to people. I said I was a bartender, right? So I had this very specific identity, the girl that got the party started and the girl that kept the party going. And without that alcohol, without that, those drugs, without that stage, who am I really,
Sure.
right? So to be stripped of that by choice, I was really left with an identity crisis at the age of 37. And to like stand in myself at a 12-step meeting, let's say, was probably the most vulnerable I have ever felt in my whole life. And so then to like cross the threshold, like onto the stage, onto the boards, there was like less fear, right? It was a place for me to do work, be present, stand in myself. And I didn't have to worry about this superficial kind of image of myself that I had created. It continues to evolve. Like I'm not like I haven't arrived. Every show is different. And like the cool thing about Buffalo is that I had no idea what kind of community that I was coming into. I was, again, very concerned that people would be like, who the hell does this girl think she is coming from New York and trying to get into our scene? I was so wrong. I was so welcomed by this community and given a lot of opportunities to play women who I would have never been given the opportunity to play in New York. So my measure of success has changed, right? And the ability to like process pain, trauma, my past, all on stage, right? To feel feelings that I have never allowed myself to feel through the vessel of a character, right? To be able to do that on stage, to be able to share hurts and pains with other people on stage. And they probably didn't even know that it was like a therapeutic experience for me.
Right.
I lost my father in 2016 and had a full season of shows that were really hard shows. And so I was able to process through his death, not in my life, in my living room, on my couch, but on the stage through the safety net of theater, which I don't know, I think in another 10 years, I might be able to even articulate that further, right? Because with age comes wisdom.
Right.
But it has been my savior. I'm doing a show right now at the JRT, and I look forward to those 2 hours because I get to shut everything else off and just be what I think is myself, even though I'm not playing myself. Like I just get to be.
Right. So that's I've done a little bit of acting, and that's a great moment when the lights go out and the theater gets quiet and the show's about to begin, and you can go out and be in that. It does feel like a safe space. As terrifying as it is
terrifying.
there is a comfort in that terror, especially when you're a person in recovery or sober. I had a really great question. I was just
forgot
thinking,
it.
I did, yeah. I was just thinking about that. But being on the stage, you have a physical catharsis when you're performing as an actor. You have blocking you have to hit, and there's rhythm to the show and everything like that. Do you find any comfort and value in the exploring different texts, like the actual written art of plays? And do you connect with that at the same time you're connecting with the physicality of being in the room? Is there any kind of a healing in text itself?
I think sure. I am a very methodical actor. I do connect to the words and the voice that I hear through the words. And so it all begins with the words, right? So there's so much to be uncovered in text. And what's beautiful about, doing a show is that there's so many voices, right? If the playwright has done their job, there's a lot of different stories and a lot of different perspectives happening in one show. And this current show that I'm working on right now, which is really interesting because I play somebody who is not necessarily fully realized by herself, right? She's kind of somebody's imagination, an illusion of a human being that actually exists. And so I'm really turning to the actors whose imagination I'm in to help guide my choices, which is something
far out. That's very, very cool.
Yeah, it's nothing that I've ever experienced before, right? So like, this is the work of that playwright, right? When our director says, well, what would Julia do, Aleks? And I said, I don't know. Let's ask these other actors who are actually creating her.
What play is this?
It's called The Wanderers by Anna Ziegler, and it's at the Jewish Repertory Theater right now. Yeah, so it's a really interesting.
And that's a device the playwright consciously wrote in.
Right. And I don't know if she knew when she was creating this character, my character's name is Julia. I don't know if she knew when she was creating her how much Aleks Malejs, right, would turn to these other actors to say, when the director says, what do you think, Aleks? Or what would Julia do? Or what's Julia's perspective? And I say, I don't know. And I turn to my other actors. What do you think? I don't know if Anna Ziegler intended that. I don't know if she knew that she was creating this really interesting conundrum for me, because usually it's like, well, I'm going to get the backstory and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. Like there's some of that I get to do because she actually is a real person. But this vision of her that you get to witness throughout the play is their imagination, right? Their imagination of what this person is really like, which is kind of this fantasy, if you will. So I'm playing the fantasy version of a human being, which is interesting.
That is super cool. And it's been my experience that playwrights generally aren't thinking of the actors.
Could be.
It could, but that's what makes theater so cool, is because the text will always be the text, but it's always interpreted a different way.
Exactly. And so there's so many talented women in this town, and this character could be played 100 different ways.
Right.
Right. And some of them might not be thinking as like literally as I am, right? They've just created this character. This is who this character is. But I'm very curious about, Alex Watts and Jordan Levin's interpretation of this character, because they're the ones that are realizing her. And I'm just the vessel, right? So it's been a fun little journey, and I've done a variety of plays with beautiful text, poetic text that I've just fallen in love with, and like for me, that's like the beginning. The text is the beginning. And, you know, then maybe for me comes the voice. Like, what does this person sound like? And, you know, with a good team and a good director, like, you really can have this like beautiful opportunity to like create this person. I love theater, right?
Absolutely.
I love theater because it can be so many different interpretations and perspectives for the same person.
Do you think that there's value in somebody who's, you know, looking for an outlet or needing an outlet or struggling to explore theater?
I
mean, it's very hard to break into if you're trying to get on a professional level stage. However,
right. Well, because it has therapeutic value to me, right? What I experience on stage may be quite different than from what somebody else might experience on stage. But I do believe it has therapeutic value, and I do believe it has life lesson value, right? There's so much that goes in. Like, here's one of my big pet peeves. Let's talk about it. When people are like, you do theater, that sounds fun.
Yeah.
Okay, well, no, well, it is. It can be, but it's a lot of work. People don't understand like the discipline that it requires, right? So this show that I'm working on, we started in January. I picked that play up in November, right? And I started doing my work in November, and that's, you know, 20 to 30 minutes a day with the lines a day, right? Like, that's the discipline. And then I go into rehearsals 2 months later, and then there's a different kind of discipline. There's the listening, there's the responding, there's the creating the characters, there's following the director, you know, like there's so much to gain with life, with therapy. Like, here's my therapy: feel the fear and do it anyway. Mm-hmm. I have a very confident energy, right? I can't tell you that every time I walk out on that stage, I am absolutely terrified. The saliva leaves my mouth. I'm shaking underneath my clothes. It doesn't matter. Maybe by scene 3, I've dropped in and I can feel my legs and I'm ready to go. But for me, it's all about, I am scared of doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm going to be successful at it because I've done the work. So it's really trusting, do the work. That's a big life lesson, right? Do the work. And then trust that you've done the work, and then trust your colleagues, trust the script, trust the bigger, whatever's looking out for you, and dive, right? So I say a little prayer every time I go on stage, like, help me trust myself, help me trust my colleagues, help me trust the script, help me trust you, whatever you is. And then I leap. And then the reward on the other side, right? The best high I've ever had.
Yeah.
The best high I've ever had.
There's a lot of actors who have served in the military, and Adam Driver is a very recent one. I don't know if you're familiar with any of his work, but he was in the Marine Corps, and he was injured doing workups ready to deploy overseas to Iraq. And he blew out a knee, something happened, he got hurt, he couldn't go, and that completely crushed and devastated him. And he had to get out of the Marine Corps, and he had to sit home while his team was deployed overseas. So he had this big gaping, like, missing place in his soul. And he goes on to talk about how theater was something that he didn't expect would have such similar, like, requirements, and that you're working on a team. Everything is very tight, and execution is paramount. Everybody has to be on time in their spot when they need to be there. Your costume, right? Your uniform, everything has to be completely squared away, right?
You have to rely on other people.
You have to rely on your team. And I just thought it's a very beautiful thing. And that's a good example, because a lot of what I'm trying to access is, or to encourage people to do things outside their comfort zone. And a lot of people are coming on this podcast and telling me that they didn't expect what they found when going down the road or the journey of pursuing an arts practice. And I think Your story highlights that. The story briefly I just touched about, Adam Driver, highlights that. How about, do you have any stories where you've been able to really connect with another cast member in theater on a really, really deep level, in like a healing way? Because I've shared some pretty intimate moments in the few plays that I've done, and sharing reading the text and showing up for yourself as the actor is one thing, but then showing up for your team and being in the same place that you hope that they are in as well. Everybody should be 100% bought in, right? What's that like? Sharing that intimate healing experience of the stage with a cast member.
I mean, I think probably one of the most profound, and I've had many, right? So it's hard to choose.
Sure.
But one of the most profound experiences that I've had as an artist was just a few years ago, a show called People, Places, and Things, which is about a woman who is an actress in active addiction and then struggling with her recovery. And I saw it in New York, and it blew my mind. And I immediately was like, I need to play her. And it kind of resembles a one-woman show, but there's a cast of 10. And we really handled it with such kid gloves because of the sensitivity of the topic. I'm feeling emotion coming up, so I'm just warning you. Like, it is,
Sure.
it's surfacing. It was written so beautifully. Duncan McMillan is the playwright, and I don't know if he knew people in recovery or what his experience with recovery is, but his depiction of active addiction, because there was active addiction on stage, his depiction of the struggles of recovery with people in recovery, along with family members, is so spot on. And it's this play is so poetic. But I think in my mind, when I first started kind of diving into this story, it was very Aleks, so selfish, right? Like, this is my story, right? Because it's an actor and addiction and finding her way to recovery, and like, oh, the language, it's just incredible. And then we got into the rehearsal room, and there's 9 other people and a director and a crew, and it was so impactful to be reminded how much addiction affects everyone in one way or another, and how much I was able to share about my own story that impacted other people, and how blindly and selfishly them sharing their stories impacted me. And I was able to take a little bit of everyone and put it into this character. And it became this really crazy survival story too, because we got shut down for COVID after like 5 performances, which was absolutely devastating. I was like, I'm supposed to be playing this character, and who knew like how eventually how healing it would be for me, but how terrifying, right? Because I was reliving some of the darkest years of my life on stage in front of thousands of people. But like, there was a part of me like that knew I needed to do that, right? The original production was slated to close on my 10-year sober anniversary, and we got canceled. And this beautiful man, Scott Beeler, who runs Westher Auto Group, saw one of those few shows that we did and was like, we need to make sure that more people see this. And so he brought it back to life. I think it was a year and a half or so later, and we did a production at 710 Main. It was originally at the Kavanoki, but I think sharing that story with this 10 people, and the entire cast was able to come on board for the second iteration, which ended up being an entirely different show because of the space change.
Sure.
And then sharing it with audiences, which Scott Beeler made sure that every show that we did was free of charge at 710 Main, which was just unheard of.
Mm-hmm.
And I had people like, we did talkbacks after every show, and had people weeping in the audience saying, like, I've never understood my child more than I have right now. And so to be able to give that gift to other people, or to be able to give somebody hope, or to be able to, like I said, to heal myself, to like come face to face with this version of myself that I hated, right? That I'm mad at, like, you wasted 15 years of my life. But to come face to face with her every night, woo, really powerful. Really powerful. So that's kind of a roundabout way of answering your question that had nothing to do with your question.
No, it was terrific. It answered it perfectly. So people that are listening to this podcast, even if you're just go see live theater, go see a local play wherever you're at, and just be open-minded, because you don't have to be an actor or a director to get the value of theater.
There's something about, I've had the blessings and the gifts of doing some on-camera stuff, and the camera likes me, right? Like, I look decent on camera. That's a whole different beast, right? And to me, I almost think that's harder, right? Doing on-camera stuff, TV, film, is harder for me. I enjoy walking across that threshold and just going for 2 hours and having that journey. But there's something about that audience that is like the missing character, right? The breath, the gasps, the giggles, the shuffling in your seat, like, even, in like the small space, like at the JRT right now, like, oh, it's our favorite thing to have one of those moments hit and hear people get upset, right? React, breathe, grunt, they're mad. And I'm just like, oh, we got them, There's just like this energy exchange that you as an actor, if you're not familiar, right, you don't know what that feels like, but it is a rush, right? When you can feel people getting upset in their seats, or finding joy, or experiencing some sort of emotion, like, it is priceless. And then as an audience member, the same, like, if they've got you, if the actors have you and you're on the ride, like, it's easy to get swept away. And the fun thing about this play that I'm in right now is there is a little surprise. And I love to hear, like, did people know? Did they get it? When did they figure it out? They didn't? Oh, okay, good. That means I'm doing my job. I love that exchange of energy between the audience and the participants on stage.
Yeah, that's very similar to the music world, which is where I have most of my experience. So you can either be a studio musician or a live performer, right? And generally most people do both, but there are some people more at home in the studio or on the camera than there are with that. Anything could happen. Your drums can fall off the stage and the audience is still there and they want their entertainment. So you better figure it out in the moment.
And therein lies like that life lesson, right? Like, you're a human being. You're flawed, right?
Yes.
And so I'm like I said, very methodical. I'm a perfectionist by nature. And so over the past decade, with my recovery parallel to this journey in my career as an actor, I've learned to accept my humanity, right? I've learned to accept my flaws. I've learned to move through error on stage and error in life without letting it debilitate me. Whereas in the past, I would be completely debilitated. I'd be horrified. Like I said, there was that image that I was trying to uphold. And I accept it now, like that I'm going to mess up. going to mess up on stage. Somebody else is going to mess up on stage, and we will carry on. We will just keep going, keep it moving, you know? And that's life, right?
Yeah, we will carry on.
Yeah.
I really love that. Well, what else do you have going on? What do you have any shows after this one?
I have nothing on the books right now, but that's not to say stuff won't come. It's that time of year here in Buffalo where people are looking ahead at their other seasons. But one thing I've noticed in this community too is people are auditioning more, right? Which, you know, before it was like you just kind of got assigned roles and you're so grateful for that. But I do love that a lot of theaters are opening their doors to auditions, allowing directors to choose their casts. And so while my insecurities tell me, you know, I'll never work again, I just have to kind of hold on, you know, that, you know, something will present itself. Whatever's meant for me will present itself as it has demonstrated in the past. Again, another life lesson. What is meant for me will arrive. I do ongoing radio spots for Wester Auto Group. So every month I'm in the studio with, you know, Bill's legend, Steve Tasker. Yes.
I love Steve Tasker.
So he and I go to the studio once a month and we lay down some radio commercials. So that's kind of an ongoing thing. And I am exploring some writing right now,
oh,
actually.
I'm glad I asked you about text.
Yeah. So I kind of waffle in between, like I'm good at this and I'm terrible at this.
Mm-hmm.
But I have a few ideas percolating. And like I said, I'm turning 50. And so that's kind of a milestone birthday. And a lot of changes have happened in this last year. I just moved my mom to Buffalo from Idaho. She's been out west for 40 plus years. And so, you know, a lot of like kind of threshold birthdays. She just turned 80. I'm turning 50. And so I have an idea to do a 12 steps for regular people, right? So you don't have to necessarily claim alcohol or drugs or anything, but like how beneficial the 12 steps are for everyone.
I said that when full disclosure, I'm in the program as well. I've been sober for 12 years, similar time we got sober, but that was one of my first impressions was that why isn't this being taught?
Why isn't everyone doing this?
This emotional toolkit is valuable to everybody. So
right.
I fully support that.
Yeah.
idea.
So, you know, and like I said, I have a lot of experience, like journeying around the United States and have a lot of experience out west. And so I'm kind of trying to utilize my experiences in the outdoors, and can I come up with an Aleks-fied way to introduce the 12 steps to people who may be interested in them, but they don't necessarily have addiction issues or whatever, just something that they're curious about bettering their life. I'd also love to write some kind of memoir in regards to my recovery journey. I think it would also make a good one-woman show.
Definitely.
You know, so I've got a lot of ideas, and it's, again, thankfully, I do have the ability to be disciplined, and it's just a matter of like sitting down and writing for 20 to 30 minutes a day and just doing it. Because a novel or some sort of memoir doesn't write itself. It's up there. It's just a matter of like crafting it.
You're right, but you know what else? You can't climb a mountain without climbing a mountain.
That's right.
And you can do hard things.
Yes. So that's what I'm doing. I'm exploring writing this year.
Well, I think that's a good spot to tidy this up here. Aleks Malejs, thank you for coming by.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome. This is the Birds in the Sky podcast. I'm your host, Matthew Crane. Please like, share, subscribe, all that stuff so we can keep this content coming out to you all. Thank you.